Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone.
This is the mayor talking. They don't know.
I don't want to bang that thing. No. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order this Board of Mayor and Alderman meeting for Tuesday, September 5th. We do have everyone here tonight. If everyone would please stand for the opening prayer by Alderman Jeff McKee, and please remain standing for the pledge.
Bow your heads, please. Dear Heavenly Father, we give you all the glory and praise tonight, Lord. Just thank you for loving us, even though we don't deserve it. Lord, I ask for wisdom tonight in our tonight's meeting, and Lord, I pray over our staff and our firemen. Keep us safe, Lord. Just keep them safe while they're doing their daily jobs, Lord, and just lift this whole board up. Pray over them, Lord, our department heads, our staff, Lord. Thank you for our town. It's such a gift. Lord, just praise your name. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Lieutenant Ross, since you're riding as chief this week, I'll let you lead us in the prayer. Pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Before we get going, if anyone's here to speak on any particular topic, we do have cards that were picked up out front, or Mrs. Owens has some right here. If you would like some, just raise your hand or come up here and grab one from Mrs. Owens. In a second, I will call anybody up if they have a topic they'd like to talk about, any particular topic. But we just do that so we can keep a record of your question and your name and address and put it on file. So if anyone does anybody have anything that they're specifically wanting to come talk about? If not, you can still change your mind here for the next couple minutes. All right, so do I have a motion to approve the minutes from the August 7th, 2023 meeting?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Biggs, second by Mr. Harmon. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? That item passes. Next up, this is grievances and comments from citizens. So this is a chance, if you want to come up, we can still give you a chance to fill out a card. You can come talk on any particular topic. We'll give you up to 3 minutes to speak. We do ask you to state your name and address for the record, but please know that it's not necessarily a Q&A, so we may not be able to address your specific question tonight if it's not covered under the agenda. So any cards, Mrs. Owens? Anybody still want to speak? Okay, on to communications from the mayor. We have the Sheriff's Department report. Sergeant, thank you for being here.
Good evening, sir. My name is William Dodson. I'm one of the sergeants for Baker Sheriff. I'm here to read the crime reports for the month of August for the city of Arlington. During the month of August, please forgive me, there was a total of 6 reported trackable incidents for that month. 3 motor vehicle thefts, 1 burglary of a construction site, 1 vandalism, and 1 theft non-specific. Let's see. Also, incident breakdown for the month. There was that. Of course, there was that 1 burglary of construction. Total of 3 motor vehicle thefts. There was a threatening phone call report. Also, the vandalism misdemeanor, also reported during the month of August. Breakdown. Let's see. This time last year, motor vehicle thefts, August of 2022, there were none. This year was reported 3. Let's see. Theft from a building. Last August of 2022, there was a report of 3. This year, there were none. Theft from a motor vehicle. In August of 2022, there was 2 reported for the month of August. This year, there were none, 0. Vandalism reports. It's about the same. It was one reported last year, the month of August. This year was one as well. And that concludes the,
Thank you, Sergeant. Any questions for Sergeant? We appreciate you being here and briefing us.
yes, sir. Thank you, Mr.
Quick and
Mayor.
easy. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Next up, Fire Department report.
Good evening, Mayor and Board and town staff. I'm Lieutenant Ross. I'm giving the monthly report for the fire department this month. We had 121 total responses in the month of August. 81 of those were EMS, 40 were fire calls. We gave mutual aid 22 times. We received mutual aid 4 times. We had 27 calls south of I-40 and 7 on the interstate. And we had 21 total inspections. And then some of the activities, we had 3 members deploy with Tennessee Task Force 1 to Hurricane Idalia. They were gone, I believe, 6 days maybe. I'd have to go back and look exactly. They are all back now. They did work some. Chief Harville's one of those. That's why you got me this month. We had a member go with a TEMA strike task force to Louisiana to help battle the wildfires. And what's not noted in the report, and that's my fault, I left it out, we also had a member deploy to Hawaii with it's a IFT part of the Tennessee Task Force 1, and he was there for 13 days, I believe, and assisted out there. We had 1 new firefighter paramedic that just completed his hiring orientation. He started company yesterday. That brings us up to full staffing at this time. And we had a PR event where the A shift read at the library event at the safe room with the children. And that's all I have to report. I'm available for questions.
Any questions for Lieutenant Ross? We appreciate the ones that had to go out and be deployed. I mean, I know Florida is happy of that, and of course Hawaii, what a mess. But and just so you all know, not to get into details, but that's all FEMA reimbursed. It's kind of, some of y'all may not be familiar with the way that works, and even myself being familiar with it, it's still kind of technical the way they're paid and reimbursed from FEMA. But it all works out for us and for everybody else, so we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Just a few announcements that I have. Mrs. Howe, you want to come up and give us a quick briefing?
Good evening. Main thing is the 5K is Saturday. Looks like the weather's going to be good. I hope y'all will come out. And I would love for you to be cheering on the runners or run if you are so inclined. The race starts, the gun, at 8 o'clock. So folks will start gathering, 7 o'clock or so. So the start and finish line is at Arlington Elementary School. And I know the Kiwanis would want me to mention they have a pancake breakfast immediately following the race. So you can run or watch and then eat pancakes. So love to have you do that. Next week, the luncheon is on Wednesday, the 13th, and we're having an economic development panel. So we've got someone from TVA, the Greater Memphis Chamber, the State of Tennessee, Shelby County Chamber Alliance, and then Mayor Wisman. We've got some questions that we'll pose, but then we'll take questions from the business owners. And so if you're able to join us, I would love for you to do that. And on the topic of luncheons, this is kind of news. You might have heard it, but it's not widely out there yet. But starting with the December luncheon, we will begin meeting at Orion Hill. We've outgrown the present facility. If you come to the luncheons and you come late, parking has been a real issue. And we have been very blessed to use the facility at the Arlington Church of Christ for 7 years. But we're growing, and that's a great problem. And so we're going to move to Orion Hill, starting with the December luncheon. Mark your calendar. If you can come, it would be kind of nice to be there for the very first one. So that's what I've got.
Thank you, Mrs. Howe, and that's exciting because I know I've been asking about that for quite some time. It's just it's a beautiful venue, and I think it's a great way when we have people come speak to us or come visit our chamber to have such a nice place to meet. I also want to thank you, Tanya, for representing us on the JECDB. She'll be there Thursday morning on behalf of the town Sometimes I can make them, sometimes I can't. I can't be there this week because so if anybody sees me, I'm having eye surgery Thursday morning. So if you see me walking around this next week with black eyes, it's not my wife, it's not staff, it's not anybody. It's just a little procedure I have to have done. But so do have a few announcements. We are meeting, staff and myself are meeting with MLG&W about possible LED street lighting coming up. So we have that meeting coming up. I think I let you all know that I made one IDB appointment. We are still considering one other appointment on there. Chamber lunch was mentioned, have had meetings just this last few weeks with Congressman Kustoff and talked with both our state senators and state representative just on some other issues, but all those are moving along good, and I think that's all I have for announcements. Anybody else have any announcements they need to make? Simple enough. Committee reports. Anybody have any committee reports for this month? All right, on to consent agenda. We have one item on there. It's Resolution 2023-29. So do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda, or does anybody want to pull this item off? You have a motion to approve?
I noticed a typo in it.
Okay, let's,
Well, on the resolution, it says 1.9 acres, but in the agreement.
We will get that clarified.
I don't think we have to remove that from as long as we got it on noted, so yeah. So we'll just, so I have a motion to move to approve the consent agenda.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Biggs. Second by Mr. Harmon. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? That item passes. On to old business. Any old business, Mrs. Owens? No, sir. All right, on to new business. Item A, first reading of ordinance 2023-04, transferring money to the town center committed fund balance in order to ensure fund availability for the development of a future town center. Mrs. Owens.
Yes, sir. This is a first reading to transfer $2 million from undesignated fund balance into a committed fund balance. You already have $4 million set aside in this committed fund balance. And this is something that we've been planning for several years. And so at this time, staff recommends approval.
You've heard the recommendation by Mrs. Owens. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Brooks. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Harmon. Discussion or questions?
Thank you, Brittany, for answering the questions that I sent to you.
Jeremy, we can barely hear you. Can you make
I'm
sure you're on
sorry.
the microphone?
I was just thanking Brittany I had sent her a couple of questions that I had, and she sent all of us an email with those responses, so I appreciate that. And it's just pretty amazing. I will say this, even though, I think your email said that, that the money came from the ARP money, but when I first saw this, and I was thinking, wow, we just last month agreed to put $2.2 million for
TCRS.
TCR, which is our next item, yeah.
And then, next month we're able to still transfer $2 million for the future town hall and still have, I think you said over $16 million in reserves. So I just compliment, I guess the town, you guys and all of us for being in a financial position like that.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That item passes. Item B, Resolution 2023-30, creating the Tennessee Consolidated Retirement System assigned fund balance in order to ensure fund availability for the purchase of the unfunded liability. Mrs. Owens.
Yes, sir. So last month we did approve TCRS for our employees, and the town's portion of the unfunded liability will have to be paid in January once we start. So this is just setting up that money from undesignated to an assigned fund balance so that we can cut that check once we enroll. So staff recommends approval.
You've heard the recommendation by Mrs. Owens. Do I have a motion to approve? Motion by Mr. McKee.
Second.
Mr. Biggs, second. Discussion or questions on this? I know we did have decent discussion on this last month, and there were minimal people here, including the Daily Memphian back there. But anyway, so no, this is good, and in the same conversation as Mr. Biggs was saying, and I can ask you on the next one when we talk about the over 16, we'll give a true fund balance on that when we're done. Or I'll let Mrs. Owens explain that, but just good job.
I think you've already started meeting with the individual employees, haven't you?
We have, I think we have 3 employees left that we weren't able to talk to. They were deployed to some of those emergency situations, but all of the employees have been very thankful and appreciative that you all have approved this for them. We've heard nothing but good things, and I think that it's going to be a great thing moving forward, so.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That item passes. Item C, Resolution 2023-31 to authorize the transfer of monies from undesignated fund balance to liability line for project known as Chester Street Bridge Replacement. Mrs. Owens.
Yes, sir. So this project you guys have been aware of for a while. We've done a lot of emergency repairs. Last year, you actually set up $668,000 into a liability line item for this project. So this is a request to set an additional $500,000 into that same liability line item to help us move forward with this project. So staff recommends approval.
You've heard the recommendation from Ms. Owens. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Brooks.
Second.
Second by Mr. Biggs. Discussion or question on this? I did see them out working on that right-of-way today. They were clearing some trees and around near that bridge. I know it's not necessarily this project, but it's still tied in.
It's part of this project.
Yeah, okay. Discussion or questions? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That item passes. Next up, item D, report.
Did you want to update real fast on your fund
Oh,
balance?
that's right, yeah, if you will, please, just for the record, explain the, I know we talked about it today as the email that was also discussed.
Sure. So the 3 actions that you just approved is $4.7 million that you're setting aside roughly. And after you set aside all 3 of those projects and funding, you're still going to have $16.6 million in your undesignated fund balance. That is pre-audit. Our auditors will be here the 2nd week of October. So those are pre-audited numbers, and they may change slightly. But all of those transactions do still keep you in compliance with your fund balance policy. So.
So that's a total of $6 million that we have set aside for town hall.
Yeah, we've classified it as town center.
Town center, okay.
So it could be like your
And then
groundwork and all that too.
I think about 11 months ago, or maybe longer than that, but we also set aside, was it 500 for public works and 500 for a learning center?
Learning center, yes, sir.
And that's separate than the 6 million that we have, okay.
Yes, sir, it is.
And now we're at it, and we just added another 500,000 for the bridge.
Yep, so that's in a separate line item.
And we have one other balance, one other
You have-
designated fund.
I brought it because I can't remember it off the top of my head. So yes, you have your undesignated, 16.6 million. Committed fund balance will now be 6 million. Your assigned fund balance for the Public Works Parks facilities, 500,000. Assigned fund balance for the Learning Centers, 500,000. You have your Welcome to Arlington signs liability. It's 200,000, and I think Mr. Crater gave you an update
Yeah,
on that
thank you.
project as well.
Yeah, thank you, Jane.
That's kind of just in limbo with the state. I think February is when we're. February, March.
Environmental approval started in March. That's at this point, it's February. February of next year.
Yeah. And then you have your Chester Street Bridge project, which is going to be 1.1 million,
That's what the 500 we just put in and added that to 1.1.
added to 668, yes, sir.
So that's 20, I mean, if you put it all together, it's like $24 million. That's pretty good, and our annual budget is,
Maybe
what
about
was it?
27 million, yes, sir.
27?
Yeah. And your
And
annual
the budget-
budget's 15.5 this year, so.
Any questions on the fund balance? Okay, thank you, Mrs. Owens, for having all that information. Item D, report on flooding by Steve Hill. Mr. Hill.
Thank you, Mayor. Tonight, I just want to kind of give you a progress report. Been looking in great detail at the Summer Meadows flooding situation and kind of want to report what I know at this point. Tonight, I won't have recommendations of things we might do, but we are beginning investigation of options that things we might be able to do to help the drainage. The map you see over there, it's not a test of your eyesight. I'll zoom in here in a minute, but I wanted to kind of give you the big picture. And you see there's some areas, hold on, let me get this thing turned on. Some areas that are kind of highlighted in a light purple color of areas of subdivision, this Summer Meadows, Village of Summer Meadows, Snyder Grove. The areas that are in kind of a purple color were designed and built around 1998, 99, 2000, and all those areas were designed for a 10-year storm. That was the standard in Arlington at that time. The areas in green were in like 2002, and at that point, the town had adopted a 25-year storm for design criteria. A 10-year storm is a storm that will be exceeded, has a 10% chance of being exceeded any year, any given year it could be exceeded. A 25-year storm has a 4% chance of being exceeded any given year. So that's the difference. And the significant thing about this is the main drainage system for much of this area was built in phases that were designed for a 10-year storm. So what we have is a 10-year storm system, and when we have rains that exceed that, then we have flooding. And to get to specifics about some of the flooding that occurs, something unusual about this basin. For that detention basin for Village of Summer Meadows, which is designed for a 10-year storm, has a 48-inch pipe highlighted in yellow. When we get a storm that exceeds a 10-year storm, that basin will overflow into Milton Wilson. And because of the topography of the area, the water won't go down Milton Wilson and follow the pipe. The water will go through these yards into Summer Wind and flow down to here. And you can see an area highlighted in blue. Let me zoom in a little bit further. When all that water that overflows from that basin comes down this street, there's where it will pond until it gets high enough to run over to the rear of the property, trying to get to that outfall pipe over here. So the flooding that you're seeing happening is the normal drainage from all this area that comes this way, plus the overflow when we have a storm in excess of 10 years that comes down the street. And you put all that water in there and it can't get in the pipes, because when the overflow happens, the underground pipes are basically full. So the water can't get in the pipes. The only way it can get off that street is to run over the natural ground, and by the time it gets that high, it's getting into 3 houses down through here. So those are the conditions we have, and that's what's happening in these big rain events. I think we're having, seems like more frequent rain events. I think we've been on about a 6 or 7 year cycle on a storm that exceeds that 10-year design criteria. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be out having some guys surveying this area to see if we can figure out a way for that water to get out before it gets high enough to get in the houses. We're also going to be looking at that basin and this one both to see if there's an option to raise the levee and try to retain a little more water than they do today. So those are the things we're going to be working on, but the next time I come to you, we'll know if we can do that and what that might cost, and then if there are other options, I'll give you those numbers as well. I know that's kind of quick and brief. One other thing I would mention, all that water, there's 2 big basins that come together right here. The high school and everything to the east, which is about 62 acres, comes in right there. And then this area and everything to the north is about 73 acres, and it joins right there. The 73 acres to the west, the peak flow from there in a 10-year storm is almost twice what it is from the basin to the east because of these large detention basins that you see over here. These were designed to handle the 25-year flow, and so they do a good job of that. And
So are they just deeper?
they're bigger, but if you look at the drainage area that's coming to it, a lot of it is open fields.
So it's got a lot of,
It's got a lot of area that's pervious. Whereas you get over in the subdivision and you got a lot of impervious area between roofs and driveways and everything else. So the issue we're having is just the more intense storms, it seems, of late, and then that basin overflowing. And when it overflows, it comes this way instead of going this way. So we'll be evaluating options for how to address that and coming back to you with more details on that later. And I'm happy to get into more detail with anybody, and probably not in this venue. I've got lots of numbers I can share with anybody that wants to know, but that's where we are at this point.
Steve, just real quick, just for clarification. So that the two detention basins there off Milton Wilson, off Summer Meadows and everything, is all that water in purple to, not, you know, where Mr. Bird's house is, we'll go back down, is all that water running that way, or is it just a certain portion, you know, that whole area? You know, we got the area in green down there on the lower portion of the screen. Is it all coming that way, or is it just, is there a peak? I mean, I've driven through there. I know there's another detention basin or two in that, I think in that green area too, so that's what.
Yeah. You see these sort of light brown lines here. Those are really the basin lines of water that comes to this location. You got 45 acres north of Milton Wilson, and all comes to that basin. Then you've got about 7 or 8 in Snyder Grove, and then I think another,
It's all going southeast.
it's all trying to get to this red line over here.
Okay.
That's the outlet for it. It's all getting to there.
But the
Now,
green area is not?
there are other parts that drain south and don't drain through summer wind, and I don't have those highlighted here, but everything beyond this brown line, the rest of this drains south, still goes down to the same area. There are pipes in the street here that take it down to that same drainage structure and discharge out into this detention. But the flooding issue here is really pronounced because of the geography of the overflow for this basin and the geography of this street acting almost like a detention pond in itself without a good outlet.
On the other side of town in Deerfield Estates, you had one house on Chase Creek flood the whole first floor. That was probably the house that got the most water in it from this event. It's at the bottom of the hill from the Caraway property, beside the park property, yes, sir. And there's like 2 or 3 streams that kind of come together because there's a 36-foot drop from Chester Street all the way down to the low point where that house flooded. So we're looking at that one as well. And then I wanted to add that the morning that we all came in after this storm event, every available pair of boots was on the ground, making sure that there were no inlet pipes or outlet pipes, fog. And then Public Works spent 2 to 3 weeks, Terry, cammering all of the lines, going in the pipes with large enough to send a man in. There were no blockages found. So we did take care of a few things on overgrown trees and so forth, but nothing that would have obstructed the flow of the water. So just to let you know that every available pair of boots on the ground, including me and Brittany and Jeremy, were out that day in mud up to our knees, trying to make sure that, you know, there wasn't anything that caused. Now, I will note that in 2016, 26 houses, 26 or 28 houses in Arlington flooded in 2016. And improvements were made after that storm, so progress is being made, but.
Is that when McDonald's was underwater?
No, that was 2010. That was 10 or 11. 16 was the one where the same area, that whole area flooded right there. So that.
And the Chase Creek Cove house as well. So there were several homes.
So in layman's terms for this, not to get too technical, we just had to find, you're looking at a way where that blue area is to get that water off there as fast as possible so it doesn't pool up.
Yes, it's going to rise in the street here in a big storm. Can we get it to discharge to the back of the lots before it gets high enough to get in houses? That's really the thing we're
There's nothing else.
More inlets in the street aren't the answer because the pipes are full. They don't have where to go. There's nowhere to go.
Mr. Byrd, hang on, just, that's why I tried to give, I know that Mr. Hill is going to stay after and talk with all of you. That's why we tried to give the comments earlier. And that way he can answer any specific questions at that time. And I'll come down there with you. We'll all sit over there and talk, but that's kind of why we do the public comments when we do them. And so otherwise, I know, ma'am. I'm sorry. It's just kind of, otherwise meetings turn into really long. Everybody starts talking. That's just the way it's kind of done in most places. I'm sorry. But we will stay after in just a minute with Mr. Hill and talk with everybody after we get to this next item.
When the high
Okay.
school added on their indoor practice facility, that detention basin was improved. So the levees on it were raised to make sure that it was detaining more water, which helped tremendously. And then the detention basin on the Arlington Falls property obviously is detaining them and helping them.
There are actually a couple of other smaller basins, one right there and a small one right there. As this property develops, that will get enlarged. So we're trying to catch everything we can over here before it gets down to the problem area. But our real issue is this side and the 10-year capacity of the system.
Okay. So just for what kind of timeline? I mean, weeks, months? I mean, what are we looking at for the next kind of update or report or?
I think getting a surveyor out there to get the information we need and getting that analyzed at least a couple of months, Mayor.
Just trying to give everybody, have some expectations. Ma'am, we have. We have at other meetings, ma'am. Yes, we have. I'm sorry. I mean, I know. This is why we try to have the public comments. I'm sorry.
I have a question.
Mr. Biggs.
So at some point, the town changed standards of 25-year flood. And I'm just curious, is that typical? Like, is that what typical municipalities? Because even to me, that seems, I'm not being an expert, it just seems kind of low. And I'm just wondering.
Every other city in Shelby County, as far as I know, and the county, use the 10-year design standard. So Arlington.
And haven't we, and I may be misremembering, but I think that we've had a couple of developments where the question's been asked, and those were designed for 100-year, if I remember correctly.
We did have, in looking at that basin,
That was it, I think.
we had them looking at 100-year, making sure the basin would retain up to that level. So, yes, because of the drainage issues downstream.
Okay.
But no residential subdivision. We're still at a 25-year storm.
Any other questions for Mr. Hill at this time from the board?
Are you pretty comfortable that we can come to some way to get that back into that pipe?
I can tell you that the nature of drainage design is there's always going to be a storm that's going to exceed what you build, always. And the problem in this case is when it exceeds it, where does the water go? Well, it goes to some houses. So while we can take measures to try to minimize the possibility, we can't eliminate it completely. You'll never eliminate it completely.
Other questions or comments on this particular? And for the, again, we'll, as soon as we have another item, and as soon as we adjourn the meeting, we can go in front of the map and talk. Next up, we have presentation of I-40 interchange study with Mr. Steve Hill and Kimley Horn, and a recommendation for approval. Mr.
Mayor,
Hill.
I'll introduce the guys here in a minute. Obviously, we've been talking about a roundabout at I-40 and Airline Road for a long time. And one of the steps that we have to take with TDOT and FHWA is an interchange justification report, which says, here's what we want to do and here's how it's going to work. So we had done some very preliminary numbers on that previously, and we engaged Kimley Horn to get really into the detail and the weeds and the specifics of how does this thing work now and how's it going to work 30 years from now. So these guys have done a great job of illustrating that, studying that, and I think what they show you tonight will help you understand where we need to go from this point on. So I'm going to turn it over to Kenny Monroe and Cole Yoders, both with Kimley Horn, and we were a little technologically challenged tonight. I'm hoping this all works, but bear with us as we move through this. Kenny?
Thank you, Steve. And thank you all for allowing us to discuss the issue and let you all know what we found as part of this study. Just briefly, and we'll try to be very brief on all of these things. If I'm not, please tell me to speed up. Just basically, we want to talk about the process, what we did and what FHWA requires, the existing conditions, what's out there today, but what the conditions will be like in the future if everything stays the same. And then different alternatives that we evaluated, and ultimately what we're going to recommend, if that's okay.
You're welcome to pick up that mic so that you can be heard on our recording being pulled.
Yeah, for some reason it is not forwarding. Okay, there we go. So the process, and I guess, can everyone hear me? I want to make sure I'm loud enough. So in 2019, after discussion with TDOT and town staff, a feasibility study was conducted. That was that initial study that Steve had mentioned. Following that, an interchange justification study was initiated, basically to address all of the issues and things that FHWA, the Federal Highway Administration, requires whenever you make changes to an existing interchange access. So the first part of that was actually looking at what the future of your traffic would be. And that was some of the differences between that initial feasibility study and what we've done to accommodate or to account for all that new growth that we see occurring that's out there today and that's going to happen, that's planned, and then projected for the future. So there's basically two things that we look at. The first is just looking at those initial prompts, things like the methods and assumptions for the study. What analysis tools are we going to use? What analysis years are we going to evaluate? So we're looking at the year 2030, and we're also looking at 20 years beyond that, the year 2050. And then finally, the actual analysis and report, that interchange justification report. So the study is more than just the interchange itself. It goes beyond to the adjacent interchanges in the system. State Route 385, I-269, and also State Route 196 further towards the east. On the surface streets, Airline Road itself, we look at our Arlington Trail, and then we're also looking at Milton Wilson to the north. So that kind of sets the boundary for the study area. This is an aerial photo relatively recently that shows the development that has occurred and is occurring on the west side of the interchange, but then also a lot of open land that's going to be developed, some of it pretty intensely. So that's what we looked at in terms of the traffic projections. We did get those reviewed by TDOT and approved before we began our analysis. So we did look at the existing conditions. That is what's going to happen in the future if we do nothing here in terms of the crash analysis, but also in terms of the capacity analysis. Crash analysis, we looked at data over a 3-year period from 2020 to 2022. In the capacity analysis, we looked at, again, those future years, 2030, 2050. Over that 3-year period, there were 21 crashes that occurred at the interchange. 12 of those occurred on the airline itself, and 9 on the ramps that approach or depart from airline itself. The dots that are shown here, green, shows it's property damage only crash, meaning that it was just a, property damage only, no injury to persons. I think 17 of those were property damage only. 4 of those were a possible injury, meaning probably a minor injury. Over that 3-year period, there were no serious injuries or fatalities at the interchange. The majority of these are occurring along airline, and a lot of those are associated with the traffic signals themselves. So for the alternatives analysis, Colin?
Thank you. So as Kenny mentioned, we look at 2 different alternatives here, the existing conditions, so if the intersections remain as they are today, and then as well as the roundabout interchange. And so we looked at it for the years 2030 and 2050. But tonight we're going to look at traffic simulations that are estimated for the year 2050 with all expected developments in the future, as well as background growth that will naturally occur on the road. And so I'll show in traffic simulations that will sort of show what we estimate it looks like today. So I'll over here. First, we'll show the no build or existing conditions. see the ramp coming off the interstate, that's the eastbound off-ramp, is completely backed up, like Steve. But you can see the airline has pretty clear flow. There is definitely queuing existing, but this is the worst case scenario with all developments happening by the year 2050. And so now we'll keep this.
Let me just mention, you see a lot of traffic on Arlington Trail, and I think there's a lot of potential development out that direction. And so this is accounting for all that. And Arlington Trail really becomes the major traffic connection from Chester back to Airline. So that's why you see so many vehicles there. And of course, we're accounting for a lot of growth further south.
That's a great point. So with this image in mind, we're going to look at what it would look like with roundabouts at this location.
And I think that tells us what we all need if it won't work like it is.
Right.
That was a given.
Correct. And so with the roundabouts, we see the sort of opposite effect. We see Airline Road extremely congested all the way up to Arlington Trail at that signal. But we do see the off-ramp is clear and has flow. And as Steve is showing, the cars coming off of the interstate have, I guess, right of way, and they can enter the roundabout and maybe head north, or you can go south along Airline Road. But Airline Road is extremely congested back to Arlington Trail.
So this to me is the key to the situation. The way a roundabout works, if you're in the roundabouts, you have the right of way. If you want to get in, you got to wait. So when all that traffic is exiting I-40, there's not much southbound, so they can get into the roundabout pretty quickly. But once they're in it, they're holding up everybody on Airline Road. And the simulation shows under the future conditions, you get back up to the signal and beyond with the roundabout because you're having to wait for people to let them get into the roundabout. Now, I can tell you that we went through a lot of gyrations with these guys trying to figure out, is there another configuration that can make this work better? Can we go down to one lane on the off-ramp, go down to one lane here, and then not have them crossing each other? We tried everything, and it didn't help that situation. I guess the bad news is, based on this, it doesn't look like a roundabout is going to work long-term here. I was disappointed to learn that, but I think this illustrates it probably better than anything I can tell you. You think about trying to come to.
Got backed up with traffic.
Red light.
Somebody else use the mouse.
Sorry, it's left-handed.
So either scenario, Airline Road's backed up.
On the south side, yeah. All right. What's,
So I do have a question. So how come the assumption is the ones coming off the exit ramp can get into the circle, into the roundabout, the people coming down Airline Road can't?
Have the right of way.
Because the thing that would keep them from getting in the roundabout is southbound traffic coming across the bridge. That's a much lower volume of traffic coming south. So when you get to the roundabout, there's one car to your left that you gotta wait on, and then you can get in. But when you're on the airline, everybody getting off the off-ramp.
They're in front of you.
Yeah, they're in front of you.
You gotta wait for an opening to get in there.
And that's with a single lane roundabout.
in a single lane bridge.
Road rage and increase in traffic accidents.
Now, that
Wait,
was,
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
what we were doing here was, let me explain this. The bridge was gonna be 2 lanes northbound and 1 lane southbound. So once you got into the roundabout, there were 2 lanes that went around and went across the bridge. But we kept the bridge the same width as it is today. You have 1 southbound lane, 2 northbound. That was the only way we could keep the bridge like it was. Now, we also had them try, what if we widen the bridge? What if we make 4 lanes across the bridge? Does that help?
Just because of the interstate traffic primarily.
Coming in off that interstate makes all the
Setting
difference.
that exit ramp, which I did just happen at 5:30, you know that volume, and it's just gonna get worse as time goes on.
Thanks, Steve.
Interstate's always tough.
Can we,
At that point, we have to start thinking, what can, what's next?
I was gonna say, can we, I'll ask for it later to see the
Can you push
50-year.
more people to 385?
Here we go.
Push them back a little.
Yes, so you bring up a good point. Both of those don't seem to work for what we need in the future. And so after exhausting all options, we decided to look at a second alternative, and as keeping a similar style interchange that we have out there today, signals, but modifying the language that we have to try to help that congestion that we expect to exist. So we've developed some high-level conceptual layouts to show that. So I'll zoom in to the south side. You can see there's 2 lanes approaching from the eastbound ramp coming down Airline. And then you can also see a blue rectangle along the bridge. And so that's widening of the bridge that allows for 2 lanes going northbound as well as 2 lanes going southbound. And additionally, it allows for sidewalks, so pedestrian facilities. So this is still a signal, just as it is today, but with modified timings and lanes. And so if we scroll to the top, it's a similar setup as you see on the south. And so you may be curious, as I was, to see how that simulation may turn out. So we have that to show you as well. So as you can see, there is some queuing on the off-ramp. However, I would say it's comparable to what it may be today at its worst. And this is in the 2050 year in the evening peak hour, just as we looked at in other scenarios. And you can see Airline Road has a lot less congestion than we saw before.
That's with the existing bridge.
Widening it.
That's widening.
It's actually with the widening.
Oh, that's with the widening.
Widening.
Yes.
It's got a turn lane with a turn lane.
Yes, so on the east
2
side,
turn lanes.
Five lanes.
yes, thank you. So the middle is a turn lane to get onto the interstate, correct?
Is that widening at 2 lanes? Actually, basically 2 lanes and then. Yeah.
Right now, there's no parapet or shoulder that lets you have a sidewalk.
Right.
Remember, we started the roundabout discussion at TDOT's suggestion because they said that that bridge had 95% of its expected life ahead of it, so they wouldn't entertain the idea of widening the bridge.
Basically, what they're saying is for interstate purposes, we don't need a wide bridge. It's all local traffic.
Yeah. So, what's next?
So I'll hand it up to Kenny.
I don't like any of these options.
You don't want to get into it. I can tell you that we also looked at something, y'all may have driven through at some point, what's called a diverging diamond interchange. If you go to Gatlinburg and get off I-40 up there, go to Gatlinburg, that's what that is. Traffic actually crosses over on the other side of each other, across the interstate, and then crosses back. Biggest problem with that works great here, but you gotta separate those lanes of traffic some distance away from the interchange. So if you're taking out access to property on the south, you're probably widening the Hall Creek Bridge. The price tag on that gets pretty high. But the diamond, conventional diamond with extra lanes and signal timing set up properly will handle the future flow. And unfortunately, that's the recommendation. It's not around.
Yeah, and these are just some of the reasons, I think why, operationally, the roundabout has excessive delay in queues back towards the south in particular, along Airline Road. It works fine for the ramp, which is all that FHWA cares about, or TDOT cares about too. But those people, trying to get up and down along Airline would be impacted. Multimodal considerations, it will not accommodate, sidewalks unless you widen the bridge, and then the cost of that alternative goes up. Also, it's a little more difficult for those pedestrians to sort of get around a roundabout, just because of the free flow movements of the vehicles around the roundabout. Driver familiarity, single lane roundabouts, work great. There's a lot, there's one in Tipton County, close to where I live. and it's fantastic. I love that thing. But a two-lane roundabout is a little more difficult to navigate and for people to understand where they're supposed to be in the lane and who has the right-of-way. The cost of that one is shown in the tip. That's the Transportation Improvement Program, is $18.2 million. And that, you know, the cost of that is because some of the ramps will have to be reconstructed, and they're a little bit away from where they are today. There may be some right-of-way that's required as part of that one as well. The second alternative that we looked at, we looked at others, but this one seems to work operationally with minimal delay in queue limits for all movements around the interchange, even in the year 2050 in the PM peak and the AM peak for the interchange or the intersection on the north side. It will accommodate pedestrians, but that, you know, is because there will have to be some widening of the bridge itself. It is similar to the existing, so it's very familiar to motorists. The cost of that one is roughly, you know, $19.2 million.
Bulk of that cost is probably the bridge. The bulk of that cost is probably the bridge widening it.
It is, yeah, about 5.5 to 6 million is the bridge itself. Let me see, I think it was 600,000 or so, 700,000 was for the traffic signals, because those would have to be reconstructed. And then the rest was just pavement widening, earthwork, drainage, all of those typical civil items.
I think even with the Diamond interchange, you have an opportunity to improve the entire area. So look at the bridge,
Yes.
the look at the exits, you saw that
Triangles.
they're bigger, and yeah, all of that would be able to be improved, which would add to that price tag, no doubt.
Can you go back up to that picture real quick, since you were up top on the north side of the bridge? What does that do? So I was looking at the widening. Is that widening any of the road there? Because I know we've widened up past the bridge, but right in front of the Shell station, we haven't completed all that widening, have we? It's all complete right there?
All complete.
I think you would have, that's probably a new lane right there on the
It is.
west side for slip lane for
State Road is where they're really colored.
Yeah, because you lose a lane.
Right
Yeah.
now, the outside lane is the right turn lane.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's a very heavy movement in the morning for people leaving home to go work, you know.
Mhm.
We needed that, and we needed it to be that long to accommodate those vehicles to get them out of the through lanes.
That widening occurs south of the bridge, so we're not
Not encroaching the bridge. So, in the nuts and bolts here, so in a perfect world, what will we be looking at? I know we had to go to TDOT for approval, look for grant funding, timing. So if we were able to start tomorrow, how many years process is this?
Depends on whether TDOT wants to manage it themselves, or if they want us to locally manage it.
I mean, 'cause I know we need it for the traffic issue. I mean, that's number one, and it's going to, inevitably, it's going to have to be done. But two, we're also, but I know we're also looking, as we do this, for the aesthetic improvements that we're trying to get done there. So that's what I'm trying to say. I mean, is this 5 years minimal, 7 years minimal? I mean, it's minimal.
probably 7. Once TDOT accepts this study and says, okay, we agree with your recommendation, the next step's gonna be an environmental document, which is gonna take, what, a year and a half?
Probably a year and a half, yeah.
So are we supposed to, based on this recommendation tonight, I know we don't have anything drawn up, are we supposed to make a recommendation tonight, Mr. Durant?
We need you to agree that the roundabouts don't work. And we need you to give staff, we want you to give staff permission to submit this alternative to TDOT.
Well,
TDOT won't accept a roundabout.
I mean, moving away from the roundabouts, it doesn't really hurt my feelings, because I get the middle finger every time I'm in Madison, Mississippi.
Because you don't, you're that guy that's queuing it up.
But, so I guess you said if TDOT manages it or if they don't manage it, but I heard 7 years. Which alternative is the 7 years?
It's faster, we do it.
If we manage it, okay.
Twice as long as they do.
I say, let's manage
Yeah,
it.
this one's different, it's over I-40.
Touch the interstate highway system.
Yep.
Particularly widening the bridge.
We
Less
do,
chances for us to manage it when you're dealing with a state bridge.
We may know somebody that knows somebody that will still give us the same answer, but we'll see if we can get the right answers. But I don't want to, me personally, I don't want to hold up anything because knowing how long the TDOT process is.
Very successful managing TDOT projects, and we have a very capable staff to do that. Not to mention that we hire quality consultants, so hopefully, you know, we can convince them that this is the first step.
We've been discussing a roundabout for what, a year and a half? 2 years?
Longer than that.
Longer than that.
Question I got, the 19 million you show in there, the 19 million, is that if it's done in 7 years or if it's done today?
I think that may be current year dollars.
Current year dollars.
It'll go up.
So you're looking at, probably 25 million by that time then,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's probably a conservative number.
right around 25.
And then the funding formula comes into play. Is it a 80-20? Is it a 50-50? Is it a 36-64? You know.
But there is grant money that has been applied to projects like this.
We will be in line with all the other municipalities,
Because it's a TDOT.
TDOT funding, TIP grant improvement program. First step will be getting, I think we've got funding already for the NEPA, if TDOT will let us proceed with that. And then we'll try to get, actually, NEPA design is what was in the TIP. So if they'll let us proceed, we can go ahead and do those. We've got 80-20 money for that.
80-20 for that one.
So do you need do you just need a verbal approval, or do you need something actually?
I think just a
Do we want it-
recommendation for Steve to proceed, present that to
So
TDOT.
Steve recommends,
What I didn't want to do, obviously, is submit any report to TDOT or FHWA.
Yeah.
Kind of concur with it.
So although we're not voting on the actual project, we are is there any objection to allowing staff to proceed as per Mr. Hill's recommendation? If so, speak up. Okay, y'all have the green light to move forward? Yeah.
Oh, I hope so.
so staff's recommendation is specifically the diamond.
Diamond interchange,
Bridge widening.
new signals, mast arm signals, try to get it.
And some aesthetically pleasing things.
I'll make a motion on Steve's recommendation.
And you ain't gotta teach people how to use it.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. We'll we have a motion by Mr. Wiseman per Steve's recommendation. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Brooks. Any discussion? So, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That item passes. Any other new business, Mrs. Owens? All right, do I have a motion to approve the bills for payment?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Brooks.
Second.
Second by Mr. Harmon. Any objection to paying the bills? Seeing none, that item passes. Just before we get to adjournment, I know we have a few people that wanted to ask some questions. Mr. Hill's going to stay around if anybody else wants to stay around and address some of these questions. So do I have a motion to adjourn? Motion by Mr. McKee.
Second.
Second by Mr. Brooks. Any objection? Meeting adjourned. Thank you all.
Y'all be young enough to see it happen.
Maybe.
I'm right round the bounce.